Karen believed the nightmare was behind them. Months had passed since the showdown at the factory. She and Andy had moved to a quieter town, trying to piece their lives back together. But something about Andy had changed. His laughter was less frequent. His once bright eyes now seemed haunted. Karen told herself it was the aftermath of trauma, but deep down, she couldn't shake the gnawing fear that Chucky's curse had not been entirely destroyed. Strange things began happening again. It started small, lights flickering at odd hours, the faint creak of footsteps in the hallway when no one was there. Then Andy's behavior became erratic. He spent hours alone in his room, talking in hushed tones. When Karen asked him who he was speaking to, Andy would simply shrug and say, "No one, Mom." One evening, while tidying up Andy's room, Karen stumbled upon a drawing crumpled beneath his bed. It was of a doll with fiery red hair, a twisted grin, and a knife clutched in its tiny hand. The sight made her blood run cold. Andy walked in as she held the drawing, his expression dark. He said that Chucky was still watching and he wasn't finished with them. Karen tried to reassure Andy that Chucky was gone, but the fear in his voice lingered with her long into the night. Desperate for answers, Karen reached out to Detective Mike Norris. He had left the force after their last encounter with Chucky, retreating into obscurity, but she managed to find him. Mike listened carefully as Karen described the strange happenings. He told her that Charles Lee Ray's connection to the occult ran deeper than they had imagined. The chant that transferred his soul to the doll wasn't just a one-time ritual. It created a spiritual tether, allowing his essence to persist even after his body and the doll were destroyed. Karen asked if there was any way to break the tether. Mike explained that the original chant was recorded in an ancient voodoo text, one that was believed to be lost. However, rumors of a secret cult dedicated to Charles Lee Ray's legacy had surfaced. The cult was said to be working on perfecting the ritual to transfer his soul into a new vessel, one that would grant him immortality. Karen's heart sank. She realized that Andy wasn't just haunted by Chucky's memory, he was still the target of his sinister plan. Karen and Mike began their search for the cult. Their investigation led them to a series of abandoned warehouses, each more decrepit than the last. One night, they found themselves in the heart of an industrial district, where a faint flicker of light spilled out from one of the buildings. Inside, they discovered rows of dolls, identical to Chucky. Each one pristine, their glassy eyes staring blankly into the darkness. As they ventured deeper, they stumbled upon a chilling sight. At the center of the room was an altar surrounded by hooded figures. In the middle of the altar lay a single doll, its eyes glowing faintly. One of the figures stepped forward and began chanting in a guttural voice, the words echoing unnaturally in the cavernous space. Mike whispered to Karen that this was the cult he had feared. These people weren't just followers, they were vessels preparing to host Chucky's fractured soul. The doll on the altar began to twitch, its movements growing more violent as the chanting intensified. Karen wanted to act, but Mike cautioned her to wait. The ritual wasn't complete, and they needed to find a way to stop it for good. The cultists weren't alone. Hidden among the shelves were dozens of dolls, their small, sinister smiles glinting in the dim light. As Karen and Mike watched, the dolls began to move. They scurried across the floor, their tiny hands grasping sharp objects. One doll leapt onto a shelf and knocked over a stack of metal tools, the clatter sending an ominous signal. The cultists turned, their hoods falling back to reveal pale, sunken faces marked with strange symbols. They surrounded Karen and Mike, who were forced to step into the light. The leader, A gaunt man with piercing eyes smirked as he greeted them. He explained that Chucky's essence was too powerful to be destroyed and that his resurrection was inevitable. Karen demanded to know why they were doing this. The leader calmly responded that Charles Lee Ray was not just a man, but a harbinger of chaos. Through him, they would bring about a new era of terror. Before the cult could continue the ritual, Karen and Mike fought back. Using a crowbar she had found, Karen smashed the altar, sending the glowing doll flying. The dolls around them screeched in unison, their voices high-pitched and inhuman. Karen grabbed the doll and ran toward the warehouse's furnace, where the heat radiated like a fiery inferno. Mike stayed behind to hold off the cultists, using whatever he could find to keep them at bay. As Karim approached the furnace, the doll in her hands began to writhe violently, its tiny fists pounding against her arms. She threw it into the flames, but the moment it hit the fire, an unearthly scream filled the warehouse. The leader shouted that the ritual wasn't complete and that Chucky's essence could still be saved. Karen realized that destroying the doll wasn't enough. They needed to destroy the tether itself. Mike found the voodoo text among the cult's belongings. Together, he and Karen deciphered the chant that could sever the tether. But as they recited the words, the warehouse began to shake. The dolls came to life in a frenzy, attacking with razor-sharp precision. Karen and Mike fought desperately, knowing that failure meant Chucky's return. With the final words of the chant, a deafening crack split the air. The glowing doll in the furnace disintegrated, its essence consumed by the fire. The cultists collapsed, their connection to Chucky severed. The remaining dolls froze, their lifeless forms toppling to the ground. Karen and Mike emerged from the warehouse, battered but alive. They returned home, hoping the nightmare was finally over. But in the weeks that followed, Karen couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't seen the last of Chucky. One night, as she tucked Andy into bed, she noticed a small note on his pillow. It was written in a childlike scrawl, but the words sent a chill down her spine. The note simply read, "You can't kill me. I'm always watching." Even now, Karen hears faint laughter in the dead of night. She doesn't know if it's her imagination or a chilling reminder that some evil never truly dies. Karen and Mike emerged from the warehouse, battered but alive. They returned home, hoping the nightmare was finally over. But in the weeks that followed, Karen couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't seen the last of Chucky.